Namaste. So, a friend of mine made a comment that it was hard for her because where she lived, there was no one like her, and the people were not spiritual, maybe perhaps not progressive, I don't know. But that, she was basically alone. So, I believe we can all identify with this to some extent. It's going to be pretty common because we're kind of all lighthouses. We're kind of all lights in the darkness, and because there's only, I don't know the number of awakened exactly, but it's in the millions, a million, 2 million, somewhere in there, versus billions. So it's just statistically, it's just the way it's going to be. And to be effective in actually raising the light of the whole earth, the consciousness, the grid itself, we need it to be spread out over the grid. And so what our higher selves and souls did is position us around the various ley lines and grids. And so if you look at where you are, more than likely you're on a ley line or you're on a vortice. And in this way, we could receive the uploads to do our jobs more effectively. And we could link up to the grid and reinforce Gaia herself. So, that being said, I've said before, we're currently in the decoupling phase. We had the harmonic convergence in the 80s. Now we've entered the deharmonic convergence, or the harmonic deconvergence. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. So the decoupling of the two worlds necessitates that, for the most part, we separate from third density consciousness, people, situations, things. This means not watching movies and listening to stories that are heavily third density. And a third density story is a story about materialistic things, about solely third density situations, which generally would involve a ton of suffering, pain, and usually the bad guys winning, or at least some percentage of that, and the bad guys having equal or more power. Like all the horror movies, those are third density movies because they're not real. Although darkness exists, it is greatly outshined by the power of the light. Obviously, it only goes up to fifth density. So it's just not the situation in the real universe that the darkness is the more powerful side, and that the light is always, you watch a horror movie, it's always some priest standing up against a demon and he throws the holy water at it and then he gets ripped in half, because God has no power, only the darkness has power. These are third density stories, or where corruption always wins in the end, where you're in a situation that you can't get out of. These are all third density stories. There are a couple movies that are fourth density movies where hope wins, and they're few and far between, and I encourage watching those ones. But in the same way, you're going to have to limit your contact with third density people. Now, to some extent, we all have soul contracts to help other ascenders, to help each other during this process, and to sever any karma we've had with third density, with everyone, but third density ones who are leaving. So you may have to work out some things still with third density people who aren't going to ascend. But those situations should be few and far between and becoming rare. So it's completely normal and natural that you wouldn't vibe with those around you. I basically don't leave my house. I have a few associates, friends, a handful. Most people I communicate with are on Facebook. because it's really hard to find anyone who whose consciousness resonates, you know. So when I go out, when I have to go out into the third density world, which I try to limit, I literally shield myself quite a bit. I contract. Sometimes it depends on the situation. Sometimes you might want to contract your aura. Sometimes you might want to expand it to push things away. But when I'm in the city, I'll usually I'll brighten it and pull it in a little bit and make it like a shield, basically about 5 feet around me, you know. And and I just send love to everyone I see. Every time I go out, I have something to give people as charity because I keep myself in positive vibrations. I have to keep my vibration around me as I go out into the world so that I can radiate that out instead of letting them bring me down, you know, because otherwise your light will just disperse amongst the darkness and be, you know, weakened by it, swallowed up by it. So, because as soon as you start really getting parasitically leached, you'll lose your connection, you know, to some extent. So, going forward, we will be entering a phase of once the third density, I believe, once the third density world hits the majority of the departures. So, right about the time that they're in the most chaos is about the time that we will start to come together in intentional communities, you know, in enlightened communities. Now, this has already happened. They're already out there. Like there's the one in Costa Rica, Shunyamurti. I posted a couple of his videos. He's been building an enlightened community out there. So there are ashrams, there are spiritual communities out there, but they're rare. And they will become the norm. We're going to need to work together. We're going to need to build our vibrations into beacons on this planet, literally. And that's going to take the accumulation of, you know, communities with between maybe in very small situations 5 to 10 up to thousands. Okay, so so again, that I'm looking for that to be in the next couple of years, the beginning of that phase. So right now, like we're in a transition phase. Each of us, however, I want to speak a little bit about shifting into the fifth dimension and raising your vibration now, because there's a lot you can do to decouple personally. Now, each of us should have the experience that in our home, unbound by third density consciousness, it's a whole different ballgame. This should be your kingdom, and the rules should be yours to write. So the more you realize this, that when your consciousness is isolated from doubts and fears of others, that you can do more, achieve more than you ever thought possible. This will grow. At some point, you will realize you are not bound at all, although this is only true on a certain level, because in the current situation, you still will be affected by, if now it's one thing if you live in Antarctica, but if you live in a city, if you live in the suburbs, if you live near third density consciousness people, you're still going to be affected by them somewhat. But you can greatly minimize this, especially by maintaining your home as a truly spiritual place. You know, placing crystals, doing cleansings, keeping the vibrations within the home positive. And if they're not, cleaning them out afterwards, you know. So for me, I've left the third density world completely. I don't think about it. I don't associate with it. Like I don't, none of my thinking during the day is about those type of things. Occasionally, I have some thoughts about money and stuff because bills still have to be paid. But it's and their ego, anyways. When they come up, they're just the little bit of ego that's left that doubts. Because the truth is, it is my higher self providing for this situation. Truth. That's every time I try to take charge and provide, I mess things up. so So I have to remind myself of that when that voice comes up. It's less and less and less the more that I do that. But, 95% of my energy, thoughts, or activities, or emotion is spiritually based. Unless I'm in a pattern or a rut or something, and then I might be wasting some time while I'm in denial of something or in conflict with something, and then that usually works out within a day or two or whatever, and and then once clarity dawns again, then then I'll be back to the 95% spiritual things. So there are sometimes I just get burned out, honestly. So it's not always distortion. Sometimes it's just I put so much energy, into making videos, recording books for people, studying this material myself, looking for correlations that are interesting for people, working on my own spirituality, and then still having to balance my own relationships and life. And it's a lot. And sometimes I just get burned out, and then I don't want to do anything spiritual for a while, and I'll just like watch TV or something. But I can only do that type of living for a day or two or three before it becomes a problem. And then my higher self will reassert, and I will resume my practice of whatever my spiritual practice has become in that current timeline. So, hope this helps. Love and light.